Hello, everyone. Today, we're here with another episode of the podcast Dare to Dream, and I have the absolute honor of interviewing Marky Antonio. Marky is one of my absolute best friends. We are blockmates at Harvard, which means that we chose to be part of the small group that lives in the same house during the second to fourth years in college. And I had the chance of visiting Marky's hometown, of treasuring time with his family, and above all, to learn from him in the most, I would say, special moments of my college life. So, Marky, thank you so much for dedicating your time and allowing us to enjoy a little bit of your story. But to get us started, Marky,
Sure.
I think something that might be a surprise for people is that you grew up in very uncertain circumstances, and I would love to hear from you, from your lens. What did the world look like when you were from 0 to 10 years old? Let's say.
Thank you, Edu. Well, first of all, it is my absolute honor to be here on this podcast. I'm excited to share a bit more about my story, and I just want to say it's amazing what this initiative that you're putting forth. I think podcasts are a really great way to initiate conversations and also really get down to the meat of people's stories. And I think storytelling is one of the best ways in which we can learn from each other. I'd love to share a little bit about my experiences living from 0 to 10 years old. As you said, uncertain is the right word. I was born in the Philippines in a small town called Dumaguete City. It's dubbed the City of Gentle People. You know that yourself, you've been there. I really do hope it has lived up to its epithet. I was born with hemophilia, severe hemophilia, which is a rare genetic bleeding disorder. And what that means is essentially bleeding disorder. It's a disorder of the blood clotting system. And so you usually have multiple blood clotting factors in your blood to help stabilize any blood clots. You know, you have the platelets that go there. Mm-hmm. There are blood clotting factors on top of that help stabilize the blood clot. I'm missing one of the blood clotting factors. It's called factor 8. I have a defective gene that causes a truncated or a shortened version of the protein, and so it doesn't work as well as it should. How this results is, for instance, because I have a severe form of the condition, sometimes I get spontaneous nosebleeds if it's too dry out, if I have issues with with my gums, or I had to take a tooth out when I was a kid, for instance, right? I have gum bleeds. And people usually liken hemophilia to something like a balloon. If you pop the balloon, you'll have air come out, right? And there's nothing to plug that air. That was the same for me with bleeding. If you think about pricking me, the blood wouldn't stop without treatment. But hemophilia usually manifests in more internal symptoms. So usually if I use my joints too much, I can have a bleed within my joint. My left arm can't straighten anymore because of what it's like living in the Philippines. So this is just the background of what hemophilia is. I think it's helpful to really know what the disease is like, what the symptoms are associated with it. And lastly, I want to bring up that there is treatment available. So hemophilia, although it is a rare disorder, it is, in my opinion, probably one of the most focused on rare diseases in the world. There are tons of treatment options available that patients can really use to manage their life, and patients' quality of life since this it's called recombinant factor, clotting factor concentrate. Since these kind of treatments have been put forth, patients' quality of lives have really improved. Now that I get regular treatment here in the U.S. and access to treatment, I'm basically like a regular person, or as far as regular means physically, right? It's like I just came from rock climbing this morning. I run regularly. I'm able to do things I enjoy doing that are very physical. However, in the Philippines, treatment is expensive and inaccessible. That's the same for a lot of lower and middle income countries, for developing countries. I'm not exactly sure why it's super expensive there. I'm assuming because of export costs or import costs, and the fact that we don't have our own manufacturers in the Philippines, and so it's super difficult. But growing up, because of lack of access to treatment, I was really I lived a forcibly sedentary life. I wasn't able to walk for a distance longer than a football field. I wasn't able to run. I wasn't able to jump because doing those things would cause my limbs to swell. And moreover, if I played around with my friends and I got a bruise or if they cut me, that could be potentially dangerous or even fatal, right? Especially when it comes to concussions or if they hit my head, that could lead to brain bleeds that are really that could be really dangerous for my health and could lead to lasting physical consequences. And so growing up at school, I was brought around in a wheelchair just because they wanted to limit my physical movement as much as possible. I was followed around by caregivers. I was very fortunate to have really supportive family, and they hired caregivers for me just to follow us around, because when we were kids you'd want to run around, right, and do everything with the kids. They would even help carry us up the stairs, help push our wheelchairs, all of those things. And so growing up, it was a bit alienating for sure, because as a kid you want to go around with your friends, and as kids we can't really understand what it means to have a disability or what it means to have special needs or special requirements when you're at school, right? As is the case for people with disabilities. And growing up, it did feel a bit alienating at the start, I would say. But I don't want to give this impression that my story should be one of pity and compassion. I was very, very fortunate still to have family, really supportive family. I have 2 uncles with hemophilia, so they were my role models growing up. I also had supportive friends, and so even though I felt alienated when I would sit on the sidelines watching them play basketball or soccer and be unable to join them, I still had friends who would, invite me out to hang out or just sit down and talk to me. They would play board games. They would treat me like I'm a VIP, like a very important person at school.
Yeah.
And I felt really welcomed and definitely not socially ostracized or socially excluded, right? And so I think the combination of supportive family and supportive friends, and on top of that, I had a family who was around middle class in the Philippines. We weren't, wealthy by any means, but we still had the means to sort of provide food on the table when many others in the Philippines can't. And I still lived a pretty comfortable life. We had a home in the Philippines as well. It was located in the university, and so I think overall I still regard myself to be very, very fortunate, despite the circumstances that I lived in. That was my life.
Thank you for sharing, Marky. And I think not only once, but a few times I've had the chance to listen to your story through your mom's lens.
Yes.
Tita Myrish.
Yes.
And when your mom shares from a not as much third-party perspective, because one can reasonably say that the mom feels as intensely as the child, right? Whatever the child goes through. But something that she describes so vividly is that you and Miggy, and we'll get to who Miggy is in a few, but you guys always had so much excitement about life. It never took you guys down or was a reason for you guys not to be engaging with your peers or not to be participating, for example, in I'll not go to school. It was something that you guys from very early on saw it through a lens that was something that was not a reason for pity or self-pity, but instead you guys were able to really manage that with so much courage and still looking at life with such a proactive, creative, forward-looking, and I find that to be one of the most beautiful things.
Thank you.
Because you see that in a child. Imagine a child from 0 to 10 years old that is getting to school, not being able to engage in all sorts of activities that their peers are engaged in. That could be a reason for, one would imagine, sadness. But instead, you guys faced and managed the situation with so much joy, and that's a beautiful, beautiful example. Marky, I think a lot of people who are listening to us, when you say Philippines, they don't know what should come to their minds. So would you mind walking us through where the Philippines is located in the world to get us started? It's a very intro question, but I think the Philippines has so many unique things. It's truly home to so much beauty and diversity in the world.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd love for you to just walk someone through, like give them like a movie in their minds about what the Philippines is like.
Of course, I'm happy to. By the way, Miggy is my twin brother. He also has hemophilia, so we can go into that later. He experienced, I don't speak for him, but
Yeah.
we both grew up in the Philippines together, of course, and I'm very close to my twin brother. And we both grew up with hemophilia, so I think that was another part of, you know, that was another really helpful. I mean, having a twin brother was really, really helpful to adapting because you weren't
Mhm.
alone in the struggles you faced. Really went through it together, and so I don't want to discount that when I say, how we really were able to get through these difficult circumstances, as you said, and have a proactive and creative look on life despite the difficult circumstances. Regard to the Philippines, I'd be happy to share. I will say I've been living in the U.S. for 10 years. Of course, I've visited frequently and took you guys there for the
Yeah.
Philippine J-term trip with the Harvard Philippine Forum. But and I mean, I am an immigrant and I am a U.S. citizen now. But I'm going to share what my view is of the Philippines, as someone who lived there when I was younger and who continues to go back and continues to think of the Philippines and being Filipino as a very vital part of my identity.
Mhm.
I grew up in a small town called Dumaguete City. It's in the central region of the Philippines called Visayas. Um, it's sort of more southern, but it's sort of jutting out of an island called Negros Oriental,
Mhm.
and it's next to. And people might know Cebu. It's one of the big sort of like when you talk about the Philippines, people usually think about Manila, Cebu, Davao, maybe Mindanao, Palawan. Those touristy areas. I'm like a 1 hour ferry ride from Cebu Island. The Philippines is an archipelago, so it has 7,000 plus islands.
7,000 plus islands.
7,000 plus islands, yeah.
Incredible.
Incredible, but you can imagine it makes it difficult
Totally.
for healthcare delivery, for a lot of
Get
different
around.
things, social services, get around. And I grew up on one of those islands. The islands are not built the same, but this is a relatively larger island.
Mhm.
I grew up on one tip of it called Dumaguete City, and it's a small city. I think of it as a university town, very much like Cambridge, like Harvard.
Yeah.
The Silliman University is sort of the centerpiece of Dumaguete City, and so Silliman University is there, and it occupies a large part of the city. And the city is very urban. It's very modernized now. Before I left the Philippines, there weren't many restaurants. It wasn't as crowded. There wasn't any traffic. Now it's very traffic. There's a lot more dust in the air. But I still very much love my home city, and I always get a sense of nostalgia when I go back. It's always lovely. In terms of like broader overview of what the Philippines looks like, the Philippines is a lower middle income country, so I'm not sure what the average annual family income is, but I think it's around $5,000. I could be wrong. The cost of living is of course lower, but a lot of Filipinos live under the poverty line, and there's tons of videos online you can check out as well. Tons of Filipinos live in what do you call this, like in
Informal
Brazil,
housing.
yeah, informal housing. They live in informal housing even in the capital city.
Mhm.
Those in the capital city also, some of them cook something called pagpag, which is food that they get from food waste that's thrown out of restaurants or other
Mhm.
places. They recook that, they clean it and then recook it, and reserve it to members of the community. So it is a lower middle income country, and I just want to make sure that the reality is there.
Mhm.
But by no means is it a poor country in terms of culture, in terms of spirit, in terms of
Definitely not.
values, right? I think you won't find a big statement, bold statement, but I don't think you'll find people as willing to share part of themselves, part of their country and their culture and where they grew up, and also part of their food and their some of their possessions as Filipino people. I think the values that were nurtured in me from growing up, I really take with me here
Mhm.
to the U.S. and their values, like, values of family. We really value family time. I remember every Sunday we would have the extended family come together. I'm close with a lot of my different cousins, even though I have a billion cousins spread out over the world. I still call my family and relatives back in the Philippines regularly. Also the concept of bayanihan, very collectivist, where the community helps each other sort of thrive. Bayanihan actually comes from this concept where old bamboo huts or houses of Filipino villages, they would have these little poles at the bottom, so that if they needed to migrate, the entire community could help carry the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that nature of helping each other out, very collectivist, very much less individualist as American culture is, or I've found it to be. So I've had a lot of culture shocks coming here. What else about Filipino culture? Filipino food is amazing.
Amazing.
Maybe a bit oily. We eat a lot of pork. Spaghetti, adobo. We love our food there too. Rich marine wildlife. Unfortunately, the Philippines is also impacted by a lot of climate disasters. We have multiple typhoons a year. I've experienced a 7.1 earthquake on the Richter scale, which is pretty scary. The ground literally splits open. But it is a very diverse country in terms of wildlife and marine life. Lots of mangroves as well. Lastly, it is a very tropical country, so it is warm year round. They only have 2 seasons, sunny and rainy. I'm not sure what you were getting at with the question, but I tried to answer it from all.
That was great. That was
facets.
a fantastic crash course on the Philippines. And this January, I had the pleasure of visiting the Philippines.
Right.
Not only Manila, the capital, but Marky's hometown, Dumaguete, and also going to Boracay, which is one of the many paradises in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I learned is that one of the most spoken language, if not the most, is Tagalog.
Yes, so language, Tagalog,
in
yes.
Dumaguete, it's Bisaya, but there is this word in Tagalog that really got me, which is pagasa. And pagasa in Tagalog is hope, and there's the sense of action as well that comes with hope. And how is hope in Bisaya? I knew it. I totally knew it. It's paglaon, maybe.
Paglaon. We don't usually pagasa. You can also use for
you
hope.
can always use it.
Yeah.
For, you can also use
There
it for
there are
hope.
some like similarities in Tagalog
Between
and Bisaya.
in Bisaya,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that struck me when I was in the Philippines was that I got there and I felt like I was back in Latin America, but I couldn't be farthest.
Yeah.
Like
that's
to
very
get to
similar.
the Philippines from Brazil, the journey was like 40 plus hours.
Yeah.
I took a flight from Brasilia, my hometown, to São Paulo to London. From London, I went to Oman in the Middle East.
Oh, are you at 4?
Yeah, and then from Oman, I went to Manila.
Oh wow.
But still, when I got there, I felt so much like home. First, because Filipino people have this unique ability of making people feel welcomed.
Yeah.
Because of the warmth, because of the love, the sense of family. But another thing that explained why was that Filipino was under Spanish rule, colonial rule,
Yes.
and then American colonial rule.
Yes.
So it is the only Catholic country in all Asia, if I'm not mistaken, right? And your name, Marky, first name Marco,
Yes.
is a name that you can easily find it in Brazil.
Yeah.
And in Brazil is Portuguese speaking, but also in Spanish speaking
Yeah.
countries. So I think one of the things that impressed and also was super heartwarming was that I traveled the farthest I could ever go, but I still found so many similarities with home. I think it speaks a lot to the shared humanity we have,
Yeah.
and also to the complexities of this world.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
unfortunately, colonial rule went that far.
Yeah.
But Marky, I wanted to bring us back to, I think, closer to the present days. And I think perhaps one of the most special things about the present day is that we are 4 hours apart from your birthday and celebrating Marky's big 22nd. And when I was in Dumaguete and had the chance of visiting your aunt and your family and was such a lovely time. I got a little gift for you from Dumaguete that I felt like I should only give in a very special occasion. So I got Marky Dumaguete gift, and it says, "I love Dumaguete." I find it very unlikely that you'll be able to see on the camera, but I truly love Dumaguete, and when I was there, happy birthday, happy early birthday. But when I was in Dumaguete, I had the chance of not only being welcomed by Marky's family, but to spend time with Dumaguete youth leaders at the city council, and to visit Silliman University, and to see that, just like in Brazil, we face definitely some challenges, but the level of vibrancy of, the ways in which the youth organizes and provide activity for their peers and creatively create new solutions, it's incredible. So I left there feeling very inspired, and I do think there are Filipino innovations that can spread throughout the whole world.
Of course.
Marky, now getting to the
Thank
next
you for the
question.
gift, by the way, bro. This is very lovely. Actually,
course.
funny enough, when you live in a place, or when you live in a city in general, you don't really get souvenirs. There's nothing that anchors me back to Dumaguete, except for maybe my sticker in my laptop. But this is lovely, bro. Thank you.
So I was carrying this for this long, waiting for a special occasion, and it finally came. And I brought a few for your family as well. So I have one for Tito Myris and for Tito Jojo.
You're so sweet.
Marky's there. But Marky, we started talking a little bit about the years of you growing up, but there is a piece that I need to grab from you. You're such a humble guy, but there's a piece about excellence that I need to hear from you. In those years in middle and high school, you are, a competitive fencing player, and you were also performing in the world's toughest science exams. So I'd love to hear that from you. You moved to a new country, you were adjusting yourself, and within a few years, you were studying in one of the United States' most challenging high schools, plus playing at a world championship level, both at sports and in sciences. And I think that is incredibly, as a friend, I can hype you up. And Marky, whatever you do incredibly well. So get there. That this is a time for you to, I think everyone is so curious. Fencing, how often would you practice? Which championships did you participate? And you went so far in both science and fencing.
Thank you. I will say I think you brought a lot of aspects about the Philippines that were super salient. Thank you for bringing up language and the shared colonial history of the Philippines. Another interesting thing is the U.S. and Japan did occupy the Philippines for brief spurts during World War II, and the U.S. especially has had, I think, a very lasting impact and a very enduring impact on Philippine culture. And that shows in our social media penetrance, that shows in the number of people that speak English in the Philippines. You probably didn't find it hard to go around because compared to other countries, they all speak English, and so you'd be able to get around pretty easily if you're a tourist. And I think that those factors of being more accustomed or more in tune with American culture as a whole really did facilitate my transition into the U.S. And it came when I was 12, when I was relatively older and was able to really, learn what it was like to balance my identity as a Filipino living in the U.S. I was exposed to many different new realities in the U.S., including its history of slavery, its history of racism, and the healthcare system as well, and how it all intertwines to create the current U.S. the current system we have today in general, in American culture as a whole, which is very much built, I think, on immigration. It's really a melting pot of different cultures, and so from the get-go, you come here and everything's very diverse. There's a Filipino community even here, and so it would probably be different. I mean, there's a Filipino community everywhere, but it would probably be different if I moved to another country, because here I never really felt out of place. With my appearance, with the way I talked, having a little bit of a dialect. So that's just to preface. I think there are many things that made my transition easier. I don't know about excellence.
I know. This guy's incredible. But yeah, how did you get into fencing?
Yeah, so of course I took an exam to get into Boston Land School. And that was how I got into Boston Land School from 7th to 12th grade. So I went to 6th grade here in a local school. Actually, funny enough, in my 6th grade, the reason we ended up taking the exam was because at that point in my public school, I took 9th grade math. And I chalk all of this up to the beauty of the Philippine educational system. I was very well prepared here. So when I came here, a lot of the subjects came a lot easier to me.
Of course, he's not going to put it on himself.
It's the Philippine education
Come
system. and so I was looking for more rigor, and my parents were like, oh, this is a great opportunity. Boston Land School. It's known as a feeder school for Harvard. We do get around 30 kids to Harvard each year, which is a lot, probably a lot more than some countries. And so, it's just really well renowned. It's one of the best public schools in the United States. It's the oldest public school in the United States, older than Harvard.
I didn't know that, Marky. You studied in the oldest public school in the United States.
Wow. BLS is the oldest public school. Yeah.
After you sharing about the fencing and
it prepared me so much. Yeah.
What does it like?
Of course.
I'm so curious.
Yeah. So, science Olympiad I only did for a few. I didn't really enjoy it very much. Fencing was a big part. Fencing was a big part of my life, though. I tried it out when I was in 7th grade, and we practiced at Mo Fencing Club, which is in Somerville. That was our local practice spot, and
how many days a week would you practice, for example?
We would practice like 4 or 5 days a week. 4 or 5 days a week. Yeah. So, and I also had we would practice with the school team, and I really liked fencing, and the owner and coach there, Alif, she was very, very generous. She was like, she said that she saw some potential, and so she would allow me to fence because financially my family was still undergoing a difficult transition, coming from the Philippines. She would allow me to fence there for free, so I wouldn't have to pay for memberships, for training classes or anything like that. I would just have to pay for private lessons, which makes total sense. And even then, I got a discounted rate for the private lessons. So I really chalk my love for fencing, my continued love for fencing. I really wish I could do it. It's just so financially, it costs so much to get the equipment. I even rented equipment from the club, but I chalk all of my interest and my growth as a fencer to Alif and Jason and Mo Fencing Club. I haven't seen.
And how far did you get? So you started practicing. You were practicing.
Started practicing. I would 5 days a week. So that didn't go. So school practices. There were school practices, and there was conditioning for 3 days a week. There were also school practices at the club, but I also practiced solo with the club itself. And so I would be practicing every day almost, because there was also there were also tons of there were also tons of private lessons I would go to. I would just and. How far did I get? I went to Junior Olympics. That was the biggest thing for me.
We're talking of a Junior Olympics fencing athlete, my friends.
Definitely not the best. So the Harvard fencers are the best in the world. They are
bro.
Cut above the rest. They've wrecked me at competitions, the national competitions. There's this one guy called Daniel Zhang. He's here at Harvard right now, I think a sophomore. I remember fencing him in pools and national championships. He was just so quick. At that point, he was still really short, and he was just so quick. And they're really cut above the rest. But I think fencing, I was there to be competitive, grow that competitive nature. And my coach really pushed for self-advocacy. You have to push for yourself during bouts. But it really helped me develop in so many areas of my life, and I really just enjoyed it. And I think excellence is a relative term, right? I was excellent in my own definition of excellence. I may not have been the best fencer, but I think I gathered a lot and the most out of fencing as I could have gathered. And yeah, I really enjoyed fencing. There was a point, so I continued fencing for 5 years up until COVID happened, and then I stopped fencing senior year. So I think if COVID didn't happen, I had already been winning a couple tournaments pre-COVID. So COVID really shut down my fencing career, unfortunately. I won a couple tournaments and then went to Junior Olympics, and that was my last tournament before COVID hit. And I think if I had continued on that trajectory, I don't know, who knows how good I may have gotten. I still think about that to this day, but I think in terms of my schedule and the activities I did, I was really big in the Philippine club too. We still danced cynically even back in high school. The Boston Latin School is very much like Harvard. It really emphasizes a well-rounded individual.
Mhm.
And so my coursework consisted of like Latin. I took Mandarin, so 2 languages.
Wow.
Latin, Mandarin. We were mandated to take music classes, so I played flute for 7 years. So we did flute, Mandarin, Latin, and of course on top of the AP courses and all of that, and then our extracurriculars too. And while COVID was really tough for me, in many ways it helped me a bit get over my busy schedule. So there was a point in junior year where I had this intense course load. I was taking 3 to 4 AP courses on top of like, I was playing the flute, so I had to practice the flute. I also had to learn Latin and Mandarin, right? And I was taking like AP Latin at that time. I was taking an AP Mandarin, so I was also doing all of those. I would go to school, end at 2:15. At that point, I was also working for the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. I think one of the best research institutes in the world. And I worked for the Rare Genomes Project. I was the only high school student on the team. I worked there part-time. So I'd go to work from 3 to 6. At 6 p.m., I had packed lunch. I would eat the packed lunch on my way from MIT to Somerville, which is another city entirely. And that would take me an hour bus/train ride while eating my dinner. I would practice for 3 to 4 hours, get home at 10, 11, eat a little more, and then I have to study for 3 hours. And so I would sleep at 2, get up at 7. I was getting sick every week, like very unsustainable. And I still had to keep up with all my extracurriculars. At one point, my brother and I even created a website for Boston Latin School because we felt like, we called it Intern Now, because we felt like the internship opportunities were spread by word of mouth, but they weren't really known to students. And so we wanted to help students find the opportunities that were most helpful to them. And we even got student funding for that. We were also mandated to do 100 hours of community volunteering before we graduated. So there are a ton of things going on, and in the sense that Harvard really nurtures well-rounded individuals who are prepared to be citizen leaders, I like to think that my BLS education really set the foundation for that. Learning how to juggle different things, learning how to manage your time, but also on top of that, have a social life. Physical health and mental health, still have time with family, and learning to balance all of these, it was difficult, but it really did prepare me for Harvard. Harvard's I will say Harvard's a lot easier than BLS.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you're mentioning this, because I do think that a few people here, and a good number actually, they've had more intense schedules. We definitely work hard at Harvard, but they have more intense schedules in high school than in college.
Oh, for sure.
Which is crazy to think. But Marky, I think one thing that I had the chance of living with Marky. We were roommates for a full semester, just the two of us in Kirkland House, which is exactly the house here. You can see we were in this room right here. But Marky is this guy that he's taking like absolutely tough courses. Yeah, like the whole bio. You can't deny it. You can't deny it. Very hard courses. But you see, I would look at you, and not only you would not be stressed, but you would be working smart. Which, of course you were working hard, but you were working smarter than harder. Which I find it to be very inspiring, right? Because a lot of people who are growing up, sometimes they feel like they need to overwork themselves and not enjoy their social lives, or not practice fencing, or just, put infinite time into this. And what I learned observing you is that at night you would pull up a book.
Yeah.
A book that was completely non-related to their courses, usually a fiction book.
Yeah.
And Marky would read it. And over the weekends, Marky would play the guitar. And, there were people who were taking the same classes as Marky, getting similar results, but they were drowning in the library and, not cultivating this self-care or, leisure times. So I think that I really, in practice, observed and learned the difference between work smart and work hard. Observing. But moving to a slightly funnier topic, you know, Mark is one of the big bachata dancers on campus, which is something that if I tell someone in Brazil or Latin America, you know, there's this Filipino guy in Harvard's campus who leads all the moves on the bachata.
Oh my God.
They're gonna be surprised. You know, what is this all about? You know, now there are group chats with dozens of people on campus where Marky is the lead. And he just takes people out to practice some good bachata. And how did that start, bro?
So if I didn't know this about you already, you over-exaggerate. I'm not a big bachata dancer.
Big bachata. Better than everyone in our blocking group. I don't know if our bar is high.
Bar has low bar.
I don't know if our bar is very high. But in our blocking group, he's like the junior Olympics of bachata.
I love the comparison. Bro, there's not much to talk about. I wish I could do it more. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
I fell in love with it in the Dominican Republic. You weren't there, unfortunately.
I wish.
But the entire blocking group was there. I fell in love with it there. I think it's just such a wonderful way to boost your own self-confidence and really understand what it means to communicate, you know, with another person. Because when you dance in bachata, yes, you can talk. But you're communicating with your body language, with a subtle touch. And I think as someone who grew up, you know, I'm 5'3", you know, I work out a lot, yes, but I'm a pretty short guy. You know, when I grew up, I was pretty insecure, didn't have much self-confidence. I think bachata really put me out of my shell because you have to look at the person when you're there. You have to own it. You know, if you're insecure in bachata, you can tell. You know, you gotta take control, but in a way that's also respectful of your partner. You know, you're feeling the body language. You understand. You know, it's the first time dancing with someone, you don't know what their dance style is like, and you're also putting yourself out there in a very vulnerable way because you're kind of talking through your dancing, right? And so I fell in love with it because it was just this intimate way of getting to know someone, but also hide all of these different layers of meaning for what it meant to communicate with someone with body language, what it meant to be vulnerable with someone else, and to really put yourself out there. And I've met a ton of amazing people
Through bachata.
Through bachata. I even got an internship through bachata. It's
Oh,
crazy.
wow, what the heck?
Yeah.
You were dancing with your employer and then...
No. I was dancing with someone who worked at a company, and I got her LinkedIn.
Amazing story.
And I texted her on LinkedIn afterwards. She connected me to her boss, and we had a Zoom chat, you know. And so there's tons of things, you know. Bachata can go a long
That's
way.
the difference between work hard and work smart.
I want to say I'm not the type of guy to network.
You know,
I'm not
he's
the type of guy to
bachata.
network.
You know, where do you work? Any positions open?
So where are you working? But you know, I love bachata for that reason. And so I'm not the biggest bachata dancer. I'm the biggest bachata lover. Oh wait, that doesn't make sense.
I love it. You know, it is a very sexual dance.
I'm the biggest lover of bachata.
Boom. You know, the bachata lover, the lover of bachata.
But yeah, bachata, you know, and this speaks to how diverse Harvard is, you know?
Yes.
Our blocking group, I'm sure Ed has talked about it before, but we have people from multiple different countries. Philippines, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Portugal, Israel, United States, yeah. And then David, you know, friend of the blocking group, he's from Kenya, right? So really diverse and international. And you have people here who are like, you know, they could be from another different part of the world and love another, you know, and be so in tune with another kind of culture. Like I'm from the Philippines, and you know, I know the bachata. Now, granted, bachata is very, you know, very, very big. But maybe there's someone out there who's danced tinikling, which is a Philippine, you know, indigenous dance, who's, I don't know, from the U.S. and they've never been to the Philippines before. And you know, that just shows how much mixing of cultures and backgrounds and identities that happens here. It's really lovely.
The fantastic
Big
side of
part.
multiculturalism on
So
campus.
much.
Ida, another
Yes,
good friend of
biggest
us.
example.
Ida grew up in Poland, and she's one of the
She's
biggest,
better than me,
you know,
bro. She's a
candela, which encompasses many Latin American dance
dances, yeah.
styles. And yeah, she practiced in the competitive Candela group here.
Exactly, yeah.
Marky, in our blocking group, you
Yeah.
are seen as the poet, which is a very kind way of our group to summarize a little bit of this very thoughtful way of going about life, uh, ability to capture simple moments and, very encompassing words.
Thank you, bro.
And it comes from your personality, it comes from the big heart, it comes from the reading. But something that I would love to hear from you, if you have any line from any book you really loved or poem that sometimes you go back to and helps you keep going. Or if there isn't, if you have any recommendation from these reading journeys that you've put yourself into, that you would recommend for someone who's watching us.
I have both. My favorite book in the entire world is Shantaram.
Shantaram.
I actually put Sebastian on it, so he didn't get past chapter 2, which is a bit disappointing.
Sebastian is a good friend.
It's my favorite book. It's about a fugitive from Australia, I think, or from New Zealand. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember, but an escaped fugitive who settles in Mumbai. And there he becomes involved with the local culture. He finds love there. He joins a local, I think the local mafia boss or something. And he undergoes sort of an entire journey that even takes him to the mountains in Afghanistan, you know. He goes from Bombay to mountains of Afghanistan, you know, goes to different islands, finds love. And I think it just really spoke to me. I love good writing, and Gregory David Roberts, who's the writer of Shantaram, writes he writes so descriptively, and from the first sentence, the book grabbed me, and it just taught me so much about life, so much about love too. I recommend it to everyone who wanna read it. One of my favorite poems actually is a poem called Moments. Mary Oliver is one of my favorite poets. I have her anthology of poems back in my dorm. Lena's borrowing it right now, but it's a book literally of all her poems. And one of her poems is called Moments, and it really does speak to me. I don't know if I can recite it from memory, but it's saying there are few moments in life, like telling someone you love them or gambling away all of your money, that begs to be. Well, I'd pull up my phone, but I think it essentially sort of speaks about there are a few moments in life that begs to be, released or to be freed, where you beg to be freed. Like telling someone you love them or gambling away all of your money. And then she says, "You're not in chains, are you? Your heart is beating, isn't it?" So she's telling you feel like you can never take the next step. You can never take a risk. You can never push yourself out there, put yourself forward, because you think about all these other consequences and you think that after there's so many bad consequences. But after you do it, she asks, "You're not in chains, are you? Your heart is beating, isn't it?" She also says that it is so pathetic to approach something like this with caution, when approaching it head first might save someone's life, even possibly your own. And so it just reminds me when I'm trying to take risks, or when I'm telling someone I love them, confessing my love for another person. These are the moments we really do live for in life, and I don't want to, be older and regret that I didn't take that chance. And whenever you take that chance, you realize after that, shit, it was a better decision. It was a better decision than I thought it would be, or I feel so much freer and so much happier. It's a weight off my shoulders. And so I am reminded of that as I go off into this next stage of graduation, to learn to take risks, to leave no stone unturned, to really approach things head first, to really live for those little moments,
Fantastic. I think you guys can very clearly see why Marky is known as the poet in our blocking group.
I could have totally misinterpreted that poem.
No,
if anyone
but that's
reads
the beauty about poems. It's about how
that's true.
It comes to your heart. And Marky, as we approach the end,
Mm.
our podcast, Dare to Dream, has this purpose of, um, you know, getting closer to teenagers all around the world who dare to dream and who want to see their communities in a better place and want to often be out of challenging circumstances, social environments, and make it to what they see as a brighter future. So if you were to send them a message, what comes to your heart as something important for you to share? And I think you can. I think it would be very nice if you shared the messages looking back when you were in that transition of either 10 years old when you were finding first, regular treatment to hemophilia, or also when you were in those very busy times in high school when you kind of didn't even have time to eat at a calm moment during your day. So what would you advise?
That's a tough question. There's so much advice, and I think you could always, like, depending on where you catch me during the day, I'd probably give you a different
one. Yeah. But it can be one that, it doesn't need to be a definitive or the very only. Perhaps a better way to think about it would be, what is one advice that no matter the moment of the day, you would be happy to give?
Okay, good prompt. But I'm so used to those questions because we do our reflection nights sometimes, and I do love to give a prompt and clarify questions. So I'm always prepared.
And I love the spontaneity of this. Like, I'm putting to him a very tough question. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I have two pieces of advice. Can I do two?
Of course, go for it.
All right, they're very short. The first is to remember that everything is due to circumstance, and I understand that we all dare to dream and get out of difficult circumstances, and for everyone that journey looks different, and your journey of dreaming and making into reality the change you want to make in the world might be different. But once you make that change, I hope you realize that, and I've realized this too, even when I was in the Philippines, I was fortunate because I was thankful because I was still fortunate enough to have access to food, some access to treatment, to have a supportive family, even though I had hemophilia. And even now, the reason why, Edu says excellence, and I say I when I talk about all of these different things, but the reality is that I is not an I, it's a we. And so even today, I'm acknowledging that my success is not due to merit alone. It's probably 10% merit. My success is 90% due to my parents and my family who helped me get through this difficult time, my friends who helped me get through every day, the numerous people who helped me along the way. And so never forget that your success is not your own. It's all the other people who've helped you. And most importantly, it is also due to circumstance. And I think once we adopt that sense of humility in the face of nature, we're better able to weather all of the storms. We're able to draw on other people for strength. We're able to not latch on all those achievements to our own identity. Like, I'm a fencer, yes. But if I don't become a fencer anymore because of some circumstances, it's tough, yes, but that's not just my identity. I'm also Filipino. I'm also hemophiliac. All of these different things. And I think secondly, the most important thing to success for me has always been to draw, if I get by in the world and when I get older, I'll always define my sense of success based on how much I was able to stay true to the values that made me who I am. When we talk about maps and we discover uncharted territories, I always think similar to how in The Alchemist. I don't know if you read The Alchemist.
I haven't.
Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, my dad always talks about this book.
So in The Alchemist, the guy looks for treasure, and he's told where the treasure is, and so he runs off and he tries to discover the world. And at the beginning of the book, he starts at this tree, and he follows this treasure chest and goes on in the world. And there's even this famous quote that when you want to make something a reality in the world, the universe conspires with you to help you find it.
Mm-hmm.
And he, at the end of the book, he goes so far and has such a daunting and tough journey, only to realize that the treasure was actually in the tree he started with.
Wow.
So, as you explore uncharted territories, as you make a mark of yourself in the world, I've always thought that the territories you've already discovered, my home, my friends, the base I built, has always been the most valuable. And so if you stay true to your values, I'm sure, hard work, family, friends, being good, having the intention of doing good in the world, I don't think that will ever fail you. Those would be my two big words of advice, bro.
Right, these are beautiful pieces of advice. And there was a moment when you shared on the Black group chat. It was a page of a book you were reading saying that if we kept on following the advice we hear from our parents when we are in the early ages, let's say first time you're going to school, our life could be much, which word do you use? Our life would be easier, better, or, at least less dilemmas. But the most basic advice that we receive from our parents early on, if followed, it could really shape a meaningful life. So some of them you just mentioned.
This is one of my favorite books too. It's by Robert Fulghum. It's called The Most Important Things I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
I learned in kindergarten. Nuts! We're here in this place where a lot of people see as the ivory tower and, a beacon of knowledge. But one of Marky's favorite books is The Most Important Things in Life I Learned in the Kindergarten. And I love that. And is there give one example of something you learned in kindergarten, But the things you just said, treasure your friends. And,
I mean in kindergarten, it's like, one funny thing I've always been to point out is like, imagine how lovely the world would be if everyone took naps at 1 p.m. and drank warm cookies and milk. Or like, think about it, like, we're always told to put things back where we took it from. Think about countries in the world. Do they take things back when they take it from those other countries or people? These can really be extrapolated to bigger. For instance, do not steal something that isn't yours. You can apply that to countries, or thinking about
respect your colleagues, don't hit
elders,
anyone.
don't hit anyone.
Respect others.
Like, you can always extrapolate it further and further. I think you should read the book, bro.
I would love to. Yeah, I'd love to.
I actually have to buy my own because I think someone took it. I keep giving my friends books and then they never give it back. So I just don't know where that book is now. But I'd love to reread it, bro. It's short stories, so it's like you can read one every night before you go to bed.
Very nice.
And you just learn so much. And you go to sleep super happy.
Marky, every conversation with you, I learned so much. Thank you for your time.
Same here, bro.
I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next Dare to Dream episode. Bye.